that I preach long and boringly, or somebody's going to argue with it wasn't quite that bad, you're assuming I was here to preach. This is known as frame of reference. You can't discuss anything without taking certain other things for granted. How deep you want to dig, you start somewhere. Each of these facts are much easier to prove than the resurrection. This is a deduction. If Jewish leaders' charges of blasphemy for his claims brought about his crucifixion, they've got a bread and butter, pride and livelihood issue. They are made to be fools. They're made to be false chargers. They're made to be pretty sick-looking religious leaders. It's more important to them, even today. Everybody will fight harder for something they've said than for the same thing if they hadn't said it. Jewish leaders, obviously more concerned to disprove this preachment, which has certainly been done and is still being done. I'm doing it today. But in that day, they were more concerned to disprove it than you and I would be, which is why they instantly charged disciples stole the body. And they knew about the testimony of the resurrection. That was brought up in the temple saying, in the charges against him. So they persuaded Pilate, because some had said he had said he would raise, put a guard there and a rock sealing the tomb. And when he was preached raised, they're made to look like monkeys. So they persecuted the preachers who were preaching this. Well, I know that Nero later made the Christian scapegoats for the problems of the empire, but every record is consistent. The first preachers were abused and persecuted for preaching this outlandish bases of the faith. He rose. You hanged him on a tree, Peter says. God raised him up. You killed the Prince of Life. God raised him up. Accusations flying in the city of Jerusalem. Peter in prison for preaching that message. Persecuted. Persecuted. Again and again. And the tomb was empty. You know why I say that? If there had been a body in the tomb, the concern of these Jewish leaders to stop the preaching would have gone to the tomb and said, here, look, here's the body. These facts have to be assumed if you're going to talk with me about the resurrection, because if you're not going to assume these facts, then I'm going to take you to another issue. We won't be preaching on the resurrection. We'll be preaching on the Jewish leaders' concern. We won't be preaching on the resurrection. We'll be preaching on Jesus lived. We won't be preaching on whether or not he came out of that tomb and lived. Yeah, I knew I left a fact out. The tomb was empty because he was buried in a known, accessible tomb. Now, if the Jewish leaders instigated the charges, they were more concerned to silence the preaching, and the tomb was known, and they would have gone to the tomb and produced the body. Argue with me about these facts? I got a much easier job. But to talk about the tough job, the resurrection, these facts must be taken for granted. Now, because the preaching was with such prominence and fervor, and the cause of the rise of the Christian church, every kind of theory has been presented to explain these facts. One, disciples stole the body. Two, the Roman leaders, Romans, took it 3, Jewish leaders took it. 4, they went to the wrong tomb. In the darkness, early light. 5, hallucinations. 6, resuscitation. He was considered dead, but he, in the coolness of the tomb, revived. 7, the whole thing's a lie. 8, they told as honest people what they honestly experienced and what they believed to be true. Now, honesty is not necessarily being accurate. Honesty has to do with the state of mind of the testifier. Does he honestly believe what he's telling? And within all of these is a later one, grave robbers, somebody stole the body. Now, I'm going to tell you, all 8 of these, just like the startling alternate, the only Jesus of history is either good and not wise, or wise and not good. And you reveal your ignorance of the Jesus of the records that are available if you try to stamp on him. Or don't go modifying it when you listen to me. Well, he may have been nutty. That's the preferred one rather than a con artist. And believe the impossible. But he did say some good things. That's not where you started. That's the modification, still avoiding the facts of looking at Jesus, the real Jesus of history, by escaping from the effort. You know, like one of my fellows who took his doctorate the same time I did at Stanford, went on to be president of Ball State, said, Gene, I can't argue with what you're saying, but I don't want to look at it because it forced me to change my whole life. And I'm too far along to risk that. He'd taken a greater risk, but I didn't argue with him. I at least respected him for being honest. I keep losing my handkerchief in my own hand. Don't go there. There's only 2. Each one of these steps prove most people don't want to face the possibility of the supernatural. Their view is it can't happen, therefore it didn't happen. Therefore, anyone who says it did is just either gullible, simple-minded, or a continuation of a fraud. It can't happen, therefore it didn't happen, therefore anybody that says it did happen isn't worth listening to because it can't happen. That's arguing in a circle. You made up your mind before you started. The Christian position is it can't happen by anything we know. And it only happened to this person. Oh, there you tried in the early days of liberalism and wrote a book about the 16 crucified saviors of history. None of them came out of a tomb with evidence. This is to be looked at like any other historic event. I got an undergraduate major in history. Historic certainty is impossible. By definition, it means all logically conceivable evidence is there. And when you can no longer be an eyewitness, that logically possible evidence is gone. Historic certainty is always relative. Psychological certainty can only happen through exposure to the facts. I'm still agnostic. It's not true. It is true. Unbelievable, unshakable, irretrievable certainty. I haven't come to it yet. I'm walking around live when I'm supposed to be dead because I hung my body on it. I'm more certain today than I ever was. I remember when I laid the last book down and says, okay, what next? Faith is like glasses to a myopic man. If you're myopic, you got to have glasses. Maybe you can wear your granddad's, maybe you got to go see him ground. But at one point, faith puts them on. And if you bang into every door and stumble over every step, you're going to take them off and start over. But if you see clear, and the more you wear them, the more sure you become. You reach a state of amenness. And I'm closer to home and certainty than I've ever been. Each year I stream through the books to see if somebody, I see the Jesus Seminar people in these debates with Craig Lane destroyed with their a priori presumptions that a Christ that's miraculous cannot be accepted in a world once you look through the telescope of Galileo. You look at the evidence. There's only two. Just like there's only the startling alternate. Jesus was either what he said he was, or he's a nut or a fraud. All these are but theories to try to avoid looking at the facts. There's only two. They lied or told the truth. They didn't just preach. I don't want to even attack the plausibility. It's not plausible. Jews took it, they put it back. Facing this preaching. Romans took it. They had enough power to go to him. Even a member of the Sanhedrin, Joseph of Arimathea, got the body and put it in a royal type tomb. Doesn't make sense. Wrong tomb, go to the right one. Hallucinations, anybody with any psychological knowledge at all, there's a whole book there that breaks that apart. You've got to have a mental state of expectancy. It can't be something that's alien to your own nature. The Jews never believed in a resurrection until the last judgment came. None of these people expected a three-day resurrection. It's against everything in Jewish theology. Even those who believed in the resurrection, it's at the last judgment. You don't have hallucinations with above 500 people at once. You don't have diverse people, single individuals having the same hallucinations. But go to the tomb. Go ahead and have your hallucinations. Here, take a walk with me. We're going to the known tomb, and it's empty. And it staggers probability that somebody'd steal the body same time that hallucinations are coming down. It is that tenacious side. I don't want to accept a miracle. I'll come up with any kind of thing. There's a whole book over there that blows the hallucination theory apart by a psychologist. Resuscitation? You don't resuscitate from a Roman crucifixion. I just read last night. Go ahead and check it out if you want to. JAMA. You ever hear of JAMA? Journal of the American Medical Association. From the Department of Pathology, Dr. Edwards, and Medical Graphics, Mr. Hosmer, Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota. On the physical death of Jesus Christ. Diagrammed, taken from all sources, Josephus, Tacitus, the Talmud, many references outside the Gospels. He died probably, I got a 90-yard word in here somewhere that I don't know about blood. Hematidrosis. You don't recover from a Roman crucifixion. And the appearances of Jesus were not a wasted, bloody mess. That beating that he got had round, solid instruments that impacted in, and either pieces of bone or other sharp instruments to tear the flesh even below the muscles. Resuscitation is not plausible. But it doesn't matter. Resuscitation has nothing to do with ascension, and resuscitation has nothing to do with the kind of resurrected Christ that they preached about. So they're lying. The story that they preach goes well beyond. All the theories are just making the preachment an empty tomb. And then they dream up these imaginary ideas. The facts require accepting, preaching a resurrected, live and vital and healthy Christ, an ascending Christ. And that means that most of the story is still made up. It's a lie, and the choice boils down, forced by the facts. You got to choose, just as you have to choose, is Jesus a madman or a fraud?